The wind that morning blew low and hot across the red dust of Monument Valley, combing the sagebrush and pushing the heat into the skin like a whisper from the desert itself. Ranger Jessa Marin rode slowly along the southern ridge, her horse, Delco trotting steady and calm beneath her. He was a calm gelding, part quarter horse, part Mustang, broad and reliable. She'd trained him herself. Trusted him more than most people. It was late September, technically fall, but the Utah heat didn't know that yet. Jessa pulled her hat lower over her brow, scanned the jagged horizon of rock buttes and scrubland, and checked the GPS on her saddlebag. The route was familiar. She'd ridden this same patrol hundreds of times before, checking for illegal campers, ATV tracks, or abandoned fires. It was routine, supposed to be. She'd radioed in at 9:02 a.m., beginning South Trail. Loop, headed to Checkpoint Echo. Should be back by 5. Dispatch had confirmed. Copy that, Ranger Marin. Stay safe. She never called back. At 6:41 p.m., when she hadn't returned, a different Ranger Troy Lanning radioed her. No response. By 7:12 p.m., they had a search team ready to go. They found nothing that night. No body, no horse, no dropped gear, or busted radio. Not a single track they could follow beyond the rocky outcrop known as Devil's Arch. And in a place where you could usually trace a rabbit's footprints for 2 miles, that silence said more than any blood trail ever could. Jessa Marin vanished on patrol. The last ranger to go missing in that region had been in 1984. An older man with a drinking problem who likely wandered off and fell into a ravine. But Jessa, 35, ex-military, sharp experienced, loved her job, loved her horse, and she was gone. Weeks passed, then months, then nearly a year. People stopped asking, until one summer day, 11 months after, she vanished. A pair of hikers stumbled on a sun-bleached ribcage just beyond the mouth of the canyon. Not human, equine, scattered. Half buried in red clay dot, at first they assumed wild Mustang. But rangers came, took samples, cross-referenced a microchip embedded in a tiny bone fragment from the leg. It was Delco Jessa's horse, and that changed everything. They excavated the bones carefully, documenting each position. Some vertebrae were scattered, possibly moved by scavengers. The skull had caved in on the right side, but it was a tiny, almost overlooked detail that made a forensic specialist call the State Bureau of Investigation. A puncture. Clean, deliberate, one that didn't belong in a fall or a wild animal attack. It was the kind of injury you only saw from a knife. Deep, angled, and precise. Horses don't stab themselves, which meant someone had killed Delco and Jessa Marin. It seemed hadn't disappeared, she'd been disappeared. The SBI brought in Special Investigator Caleb Rourke, 46.com, in private. He didn't smile much, didn't talk much either. He'd handled high-profile missing persons cases before, some that had made national news. He preferred working off the grid. He arrived late July, drove a battered government SUV, and carried a single duffel bag. First stop, the ranger station. Tell me about the last day she was seen. He asked Troy Lanning. Troy poured coffee with shaking hands. He hadn't wanted to admit how much the whole thing still haunted him. She was fine, normal, he said. I was there when she left. She even joked about needing a nap when she got back. She always kept it light. Professional, but light. What was her mood like? Steady. Nothing weird? Any chance she had reason to vanish voluntarily? Troy gave him a sharp look. You didn't know her? I'm asking because it matters. No, she didn't run. Jessa wasn't like that. She'd call. She'd come back. Delco would have. Come back too. That horse was loyal. Rourke nodded. What about the area she patrolled? It's open range. Lots of blind spots. Places to hide. That's why we always stay on coms. Did she have any problems with anyone? Locals? Other rangers? Troy hesitated. Not officially. Unofficially. But there was some attention. Couple of new volunteers from a wilderness rehab group on Earth. They didn't like her. Shutting down their illegal trails. Rourke made a note. Names. Head guy was Sean M., ex-eco activist turned spiritual leader. Ran survivalist camps, low-impact retreats, that kind of thing. Did Jessa report any threats? Only once. Said someone left a deer carcass near her truck. Like a warning, that hadn't been in the official file. Rourke requested the file anyway, and everything else, including Jess's GPS logs, emails, and personal effects. Her phone had never been found, but a week later, a boot was, right at the base of Devil's Arch. Half buried under rocks, it matched the pair she'd worn the day she left. Inside the heel was a trace of dried blood. Human the lab matched it to Jessa. Now it was a homicide investigation. The media caught on fast. Ranger slain in monument. Valley headlines screamed. Tourists panicked. State politicians blamed underfunded park security. A reward fund was reopened, but the locals had their own theories. Some whispered about the Dead Crossings area, where people believed Navajo spirits still roamed. Others talked about smugglers using desert trails to run drugs or human cargo. Few mentioned a cave system never officially mapped. Rourke didn't listen to legends. He trusted evidence, and the next clue came from Delco's femur. The angle of the stab wound downward, behind the flank suggested. The killer stood behind and above the horse, like from a slope, which narrowed the possible kill zone to a specific ridgeline. One not on the original search grid. Rourke hiked it himself, 14 miles in heat. No backup. He found the remnants of a campsite, ashes, a burned canister, a rusted knife hilt, and 2 bone buttons, identical to the ones on Jess's uniform shirt. One still had dried blood. He sat there a long time. The camp hadn't been disturbed in months, but the desert doesn't bury secrets. It just delays them. At the edge of the ridge beneath a fallen rock, he found something else, a scrap of notebook paper. Water warped and faded. The ink had mostly run, but a few words remained. They said not to trust. Night Ride was a setup. If you find this, it was signed JM. He looked out over the canyon below, then hiked back in silence. Something had gone very wrong out there, and Jessa had known it. She'd tried to leave a message, and someone had silenced her before she could. The day after Rourke found the scrap of paper-faint words scribbled in panic. Ink bleeding from moisture and time, he didn't sleep. He sat in the ranger station long past midnight, staring at topo maps spread across the table, 2 mugs of coffee cooling beside him. God. Outside, the Utah wind swept through the canyons like a low whistle, like the land itself trying to speak. The words on the note haunted him. Night Ride was a setup. He read it again and again. Jessa Marin didn't strike him as the paranoid type. Everything he'd learned said she was the opposite precise, capable, level-headed. If she wrote something like that, she meant it. So now it was time to figure out what she knew, what she'd been walking or riding dash into at 6 a.m. He drove to the small outpost where the One Earth group was headquartered. The road wasn't marked, no signage, just a rutted dirt track that veered off Route 163 and disappeared between 2 towering sandstone formations. The compound, if you could call it that, looked like a cross between a spiritual retreat and a prepper's outpost. Tents made from military surplus canvas, a main lodge built from repurposed barnwood, and solar panels stretched out like beetle wings across the rocks. A few goats roamed freely. Someone was chopping firewood off to the side. Another was adjusting. A handmade wind turbine. Rourke parked. No one greeted him. Then a man emerged from the lodge, tall, wiry eyes, pale and watchful. He wore a necklace made of feathers and bone, and a shirt that said, "Reconnect to the earth or perish." "Agent Rourke?" the man asked. "I didn't give my name," I assumed. "Word gets around fast in the desert," extended a hand. "Sean M. We spoke briefly through email. You mentioned Jessa. I need to ask you a few more questions." Sean didn't look surprised. "I figured you might." They sat on a sun-bleached bench outside the lodge. Sean offered tea. Rourke declined. "I know how this looks," Sean said. "I know people think we're weird out here. We're hiding something." Rourke didn't respond. Sean went on. "Jessa didn't trust us." "That's true." but not because we were doing anything wrong. She was following orders. And we didn't exactly roll out the welcome mat either. Did you threaten her? No, but you had contact. Only once. She shut down one of our meditation trails, said it crossed into restricted land. We disagreed. Did it get physical? No, but she was intense. Like she expected something bad to happen. Rourke raised an eyebrow. What do you mean, Sean? Picked at a splinter in the bench. She came out here one night, said she'd heard gunshots up near the ridge. Wanted to know if we were hunting. We weren't. Did she file a report? I don't know. What about the night she disappeared? Did you see her? Hear anything? John shook his head slowly. No, but we did hear something strange. A few days before, one of our scouts, Elias, said she saw a light signal from the old fire tower. It's been decommissioned for years. Rourke made a note. Did Jessa ever mention that spot? No. Did you? Never? Rourke stood. I want to talk to this Alia. Sean called her over. Young, lean, face sunburned and cautious. She confirmed the sighting. I was up near Eagle's Tooth, she said. Just after sunset. Saw 2 flashes, then 3 more. Looked like a signal. What kind? Like Morse code. But I couldn't decode it. Could it have been kids? Flashlights? Maybe, but it felt deliberate. I even called out. No response. Rourke stared at the dust beneath his boots. Morse code. A ranger alone. Sending a signal from a forgotten tower? Was Jessa trying to call for help? Or warn someone? Later that afternoon, he hiked to the fire tower. It took 4 hours through narrow switchbacks and searing heat. No roads led there anymore. The structure itself was barely standing, wood-rotted, rusted nails pulling free. The stairs groaned beneath his weight. Inside it was empty, but on the far wall, behind a broken filing cabinet, he found the faint remains of charcoal scrawled across the wood. A series of lines. 23213. Rourke stared. If you knew Morse, you'd see the same thing he did. Epps, she'd been here. She'd tried to send a message, but no one came. That night, Rourke returned to the ranger station. He reviewed Jess's GPS logs again. One thing jumped out. The final signal from her unit had pinged near. A place called Ash Valinot, part of her patrol route. But close to the private lease land once used by a defunct mining company, no one. Ever went there? He called Troy. Was Jessa ever assigned to Ash Valley? No. It's considered dead zone territory. Why? Old mercury mine. Leaks gas. Unsafe. The Park Service fenced it off years ago. Rourke thought about that. Restricted, isolated area. No tourists. No cameras. No witnesses. Perfect place to disappear someone. He went out early the next morning. Rode with Troy. They brought gas masks just in case. The trail was overgrown. Coyotes scattered as they approached. And then they saw it, not far from the mines. Collapsed entrance, in a dry riverbed, was a patch of disturbed earth. Troy dismounted first. His boots sank in softer than it should have. They dug. 3 hours later, they found another body. Not Jessa. A man mid-40s. Wallet long gone. Bullet hole in the chest. Tattoo on the forearm. Fides knocked him. Rourke froze. He knew that name. A militia group. Right-wing extremists. They'd disappeared off the FBI radar 5 years ago after a failed compound raid in Idaho. What was one of them doing here? And how did he end up buried in the same wilderness where Jessa vanished? For the first time, Rourke felt something twist in his gut. This wasn't just a ranger gone missing. This was something deeper, bigger, and someone had just woken it up again. 3 days later, back in Salt Lake, forensic pathologist called. He had finished analyzing the knife wound in Delco's femur. I don't usually say this, doctor said, but I've never seen a blade like that. Curved, serrated, looked ceremonial. Almost tribal? Native, Rourke asked. Possibly. Or someone trying to make it look that way? The doctor paused. There's something else. The angle, it wasn't just meant to kill the horse. It was meant to make it suffer. Whoever did this, they were making a point. Rourke didn't speak. He was already flipping through a file he'd pulled from the Federal Archives at last. Known location of the Fides Noctum Group, an off-grid survival camp in northern Arizona. Dismantled in 2017 after a standoff with federal agents, several members escaped, unaccounted for. One of them was a former Army medic named Dean Wexler, the same man now buried in Ash Valley. So what was Wexler doing in Monument Valley? Why was he hiding? Why had Jess's patrol route changed the day leading her right into the canyons? Dead zone? He needed answers, and he was starting to think someone inside the park system had them. Someone who'd made sure she never made it back. The storm rolled in from the west 2 days later, low, gray, and mean. August thunderstorms didn't last long in the desert, but they were violent when they came. Ripping across the plateaus with a fury that felt ancient, Rourke watched the clouds from the ranger station window, silent, hand tight around a cup of black coffee gone cold. He was thinking about the body. Dean Wexler, a known member of Fides Noctum, buried in a dry wash miles from any logical route within walking distance of a restricted mine, and just days before Ranger Jessa Marin disappeared. Coincidence? No chance. But motive now, that was still buried. Why would a survivalist extremist be out here? Why would Jess's GPS route lead her directly into his graveyard? And who changed her patrol order that day? He called dispatch. An older woman named Martha answered. She'd been there for 15 years. Did Jessa file her own patrol log that day? Rourke asked. No, Martha replied. It came through the supervisor's queue. Digital form pre-filled. Who was the supervisor? There was a pause. Warren Gibbs Rourke had seen the name once. Middle manager, low-key, ran logistics and schedules. He never flagged during the initial investigation. Where is he now? He took leave 2 weeks after Jessa vanished. Burnout, he said. Did he come back? Not officially. Word is, he resigned via email. Took off to Oregon. Family land or something? Rourke's jaw tightened. He opened the old incident reports again. There, buried in a minor entry from 4 months prior to Jess's disappearance, was a citation she filed. Illegal campsite discovered along Dry Gorge Trail. Cleared, no arrests. Filed under Jess's name, signed off by Gibbs. Rourke noticed. Something odd. The signature wasn't digital like usual. It had been scanned, inclumsy, uneven. The date stamp was 2 days off. Faked Gibbs had edited the form. He started digging. Background check, employment record. Gibbs had joined the Park Service only 3 years ago. No prior wilderness experience. His references, all out of state, all unverifiable. But his financial records, those told the story. 3 large deposits, all within 6 months before Jessa vanished. $9,800, $11,200, $18, all $500. All from shell accounts. Rourke leaned back. Bribed Gibbs had been paid off, but by who? He drove out to Gibbs's last known address near Mexican Hat, a trailer, abandoned inside. Found junk mail, unpaid utility bills, and a single torn photo taped to the mirror. It was faded. But it showed a man Gibbs posing in military fatigues. Not U.S. Army, private militia patch on his shoulder, Fides no set. The link was undeniable now. Gibbs had been one of them, or at least connected. And he'd put Jessa on a fake patrol route. She was never supposed to come back. Rourke stood in the wreckage of the trailer, stomach turning. This wasn't just a murder, it was an execution. And then someone knocked on the door. He turned fast, hand near his sidearm. A boy stood outside, maybe 12. Native dust on his boots. You the one asking about the white horse? Rourke stepped outside. Yeah, I saw it. When day the ranger lady went missing. Where? The boy pointed east. By the prayer stones. Near the old cave? The one they say ain't real. Rourke's heart thudded once. He knew that cave. Locals called it Nazin, shot the Black Whisper. Officially, it didn't exist. No maps, no signs. Even the Navajo guides avoided it. What did you see? The boy shrugged. Just the horse, alone. Ran out of the canyon like it was scared, bleeding. Rock crouched. You sure it was that day? Nodded. My uncle made me mark it. Said it was a bad omen. He won't let us go near there anymore. Rourke stood slowly. Can you show me where? The boy hesitated. I can't go, but I can draw it. He pulled a piece of charcoal from his pocket and a torn page from his notebook. Sketched fast, strong. Lines, no hesitation. A curve of rock. A twisted tree. A black shadow like an open mouth. Rourke recognized the landmarks. The cave was real. He drove out before dawn. Left early. Told no one. Hiked in silence across the broken land, the weight of the case pressing down on him like the heat. He found the tree first, then the rocks, then the entrance. A crack in the canyon wall, barely wide enough to slip through. Inside it, smelled like dust and bone. He clicked on his flashlight. The cave went deeper than he thought. 30 yards in, the walls narrowed. He had to turn sideways. At one point, he crawled. Then the tunnel opened into a chamber, and he froze. It wasn't natural. The walls had been chiseled, shaped, symbols carved into the stone, not Navajo, not Apache modern. And in the center, beneath a heap of broken stone, was a chain still locked. Still bolted to the floor, too. Small for a person. Perfect size for a horse. Delco had been here. But why bring a horse into a cave? His light caught something else, a dark stain on the floor. He knelt. Blood. Long dried, and near it. Something metallic half buried in the dirt. He dug it out. Dogtags.lt. Jessica Marin, his chest tightened. She'd been here too. He turned, swept the chamber again, and caught sight of one last object, high. On the wall, nailed there, a park ranger's patch, ripped, faded still, stained with blood. He backed out of the cave in silence. Whatever had happened here, it wasn't over, and someone had gone to a lot of trouble to keep it buried. When he reached the ridge, his phone buzzed. New voicemail. He hit play. Agent Rourke. This is Dr. Sayed at the state lab. We have a match on the hair fibers found on the saddle remains. Not Jess's. Belonged to a female, but not her. We're running the mitochondrial DNA now. But here's the thing. The message crackled. She's alive. Rourke froze. Who else was in that saddle? He didn't get time to ask, because behind him, from the cave, came the soft sound of stone moving. Not wind. Footsteps, deliberate. He turned slowly. Flashlight. Beam trembling. And saw the faintest trace of a shadow disappear. Back into the darkness. Rourke didn't move for a long moment. His light hung still in the cavern air. Beam caught against stone. No sound. No wind. Just silence thick and pressing in. The undeniable knowledge that someone had just been in that cave with him. Not an animal. Not the wind. Footsteps. He slowly backed away from the entrance, hand on his weapon. The trail behind him was narrow and winding hard to move fast, too easy to be ambushed. He didn't run. He didn't call for help. He just walked. Measured. Controlled. Watching. Everything. It took him 2 hours to reach his SUV. The sky above was bruised purple. Dusk, creeping over the desert like a slow tide. The world felt different of Faxus. Something had shifted. When he started the engine. He didn't drive to the station. He drove to the motel he'd been using as his temporary base. Locked the door behind him and laid the dog tags on the table. Jessica Marin. She'd made it to the cave, maybe even escaped it, but whose hair had been on the saddle remains. More importantly, why had someone been there in that cave now? It meant the case wasn't cold. Someone was still covering tracks, and now they knew he was close. He opened his laptop and loaded the email server linked to the SBI lab. The DNA results were in. Female. Early 30s. Possible match in Cadiz. He opened. The attachment named Cassandra Wexler. His blood went cold. Wexler, as in Dean. Wexler, the militia member he'd found dead in Ash Valley. This woman was his sister, and according to court records, from 2011, she disappeared after Dean was charged in a weapons. Trafficking case tied to the Fides, Knocktum compound in Idaho. The FBI had her listed as presumed dead, but now her DNA was found on Jessa's saddle, so she'd been with the horse. Possibly. The last person to see Jessa alive. Rourke leaned back. Something was coming together, but it didn't make sense. If Cassandra had been missing for over a decade, what was she doing in Utah? Was she hiding with her brother? Or was she part of something else? And had she killed Jessa or helped her? The next day, Rourke drove 3 hours north to a town called Bluff. It was the closest FBI field office, and he needed files. Ones the Park Service didn't have access to. He met with an agent named Ellis. Older, wiry, sharp. "I need everything you've got on Cassandra Wexler," Rourke said. Ellis raised an eyebrow. "That's a name I haven't heard in years. She's alive, or at least she was 11 months ago." Ellis nodded slowly and pulled up the file. "You know she was military?" Rourke shook his head. "Yeah, Marine Corps. Deployed twice. Medically discharged after her unit got ambushed in Kandahar. She changed after that, radicalized, fell in with the prepper movement. Then her brother went dark. She followed.
Ellis
Slid over a black and white photo. Cassandra, younger, hair pulled back, unsmiling. "We always assumed she died during the Idaho raid. Never found a body. She was in Utah, near Monument Valley." Ellis frowned. "That's a long way from where we were looking." "Not anymore," Rourke said. "This whole thing is bigger than Jess's disappearance. It goes back to Fides Knocktum, and someone is trying really hard to keep it buried." Ellis leaned back. "You think they're rebuilding?" Rourke stared. "At the image, I think they never stopped." He returned to Monument Valley that night, and someone had broken into his motel room. The lock wasn't forced. The window wasn't cracked. But the room had been searched quietly, efficiently. Nothing was stolen. Not obviously. But Rourke's file on Cassandra Wexler, the one he'd printed from the FBI server, was gone. Only that, and on the mirror. Written in soap were 3 words: "Stay outside lines." He stood still, scanning the shadows, whoever it was. They'd been close, and they were watching him now. He grabbed his keys, left the lights off, and drove. He didn't go back to the ranger station. He didn't trust it. Instead, he stopped at a payphone outside a closed diner 10 miles up the road. He called Troy. "I need a favor. Name it." Where would Jessa go if she were in trouble? Really in trouble? Somewhere off-grid. Where? She wouldn't be followed. It was a long pause. "I don't know if she had a place like that." "Everyone does." A silence. Then, "There's an old lookout tower near Cabito. It's not on any modern maps. She told me once it was her favorite place to think." "Coordinates." Troy hesitated. "It's dangerous, Rourke. Remote. The roads are washed out. I'm not asking if it's safe." He got the directions. Drove all night. The road to the tower was worse than expected, rock-strewn. Washed out, barely passable. He parked a mile out and hiked by sunrise. He reached it. The tower was still intact, mostly creaking, leaning, covered in sand and dry moss. He climbed slowly, sure of what he'd find. At the top, the door was unlocked. Inside, dust, cobwebs, silence. But someone had been there recently. A tin can with fresh ash, a cot with a blanket, and on the desk a journal, faded brown leather, stamped with a ranger insignia. He opened it. It was Jess's. Her handwriting filled the first 20 pages. Trail logs, supply lists, then further in something else. June 9th to 7th, 12 a.m. patrol path was changed. I didn't log. Gibbs sent it directly. I don't trust him. I think he's connected to whatever I found near the Dead Gorge site, June 10th. 3:40 p.m., Delco caught scent of something. Spooked. Found a dead coyote, skinned, left. Like a warning, June 12th. Shooting at Limbafin p.m., heard gunshots. Saw 3 men dragging something across the canyon. Didn't get close. I'm being watched. June 14th to 11:32 a.m. Made contact with woman named Cassandra. Says she escaped from something. Brother was killed. She's terrified. Says there. Building something again, June 16th. If you find this, I may be gone. They know I saw them. They know Cassandra told me. This isn't about land or parks. It's a test site. For them, Rourke's heart hammered. Test site. He flipped further. The final page was torn. Only one word remained. Underground he stood, staring out at the canyon beyond, somewhere beneath that. Land, something was happening. Something people had died to keep quiet. Jessa had seen it, and now, so had he. Rourke drove back to the valley in silence, the journal in his lap, the road a blur. The word underground echoed like thunder in his mind. Not a metaphor, not symbolic. Literal, there was something beneath. Monument Valley. And Jessa had found it. He didn't stop at the ranger station or his motel. Instead, he parked beneath a cluster of rocks just off Navajo Route 21, killed the engine, and read through the journal again, page by page. He took photos of every entry, memorized the timelines. She'd started suspecting something a full week. Before her disappearance, a changed route, a dead coyote as a warning. Then a woman, Cassandra Wexler, surfacing out of nowhere, saying they were building again. What the hell were they building? Back at the cave, he'd found that chain bolted to the floor, and before that, Delco's bones. But now, with the journal in hand, he had something more than clues. He had direction. The Dead Gorge site. Jessa had mentioned it more than once, said Jessa. She saw men dragging someone, near there. But the area had been written off in earlier searches due to unstable terrain. The rock formations were riddled with sinkholes, and the Park Service had marked it hazardous, no access. Permitted in 2008 after a small landslide killed a hiker, it wasn't a popular spot. No tourists went there, and that, Rourke thought, was exactly the point. At sunrise, he headed in. He parked the SUV 3 miles out and hiked in with a pack. Water, rope, flare, and his sidearm. The sun crested over the canyon rims as he entered. Dead Gorge. The air was different, here heavy, still. Not even the lizards skittered. He scanned the sandstone walls for signs of human activity and found it within 15 minutes, a boot print. Not as recent. He followed the trail carefully. Whoever made those tracks had been here within the last 24 hours. Then the canyon narrowed, and he saw it. Carved into the cliff, wall obscured by collapsed rock, was an opening. Almost invisible unless you knew where to look. The edges were unnatural, too straight to clean. Not a natural cave, an entrance. He pushed through, flashlight slicing into the dark. The tunnel was longer than expected. Maybe 200 feet? Reinforced with beams and old scaffolding, military grade. By the look of it, then the passage opened into a chamber, and Rourke stopped cold. There was a generator in the corner, silent now, rusting. Crates stamped with faded military stenciling, property of U.S. Army, dozens of them, busted equipment, coils of cable. But what held his eyes was the cage metal, 6 feet high, 8 feet wide, still locked and empty. He walked the perimeter slowly. Bloodstains marked the corner of the concrete, chains bolted to the floor. A feeding trough, and graffiti scrawled across the back wall in black paint. It's already out. He swallowed hard. Then he heard it. Footsteps close, too close. He drew his weapon, dropped to one knee, and backed into the shadows behind a rusted locker. His breathing slowed. Voices, 2 of them. He couldn't see their faces. Yet just silhouettes, one tall, one smaller, both carrying rifles. The SBI guy's getting too close, one said. Should have buried him in Ash Valley with the others. He's already found the journal. If he finds the shaft, we have orders. Clean it up, everyone, now. Rourke gripped the handle of his sidearm tighter. 2 steps closer and they'd be in range. Then the smaller one turned. What about the girl? She's back in the chamber, still sedated. Can we do her next? The smaller figure laughed. Short and bitter. You think she even knows where the hatch is? We're not taking chances. They walked past the cage and into the hallway beyond, disappearing into the dark. Rourke waited 10 full seconds. Then he moved fast. He followed the tunnel they'd taken. Staying low, he passed another chamber, this one stacked with more gear, solar panels, and camouflage tarps. A crude map was pinned to the wall. He stopped. The map showed the entire park, but it had been altered. Drawn lines, cut across restricted zones. Circles marked specific canyons, and at the center a red X labeled Hatch 7. He took a photo. Then he heard something else. A voice, muffled, weak. He moved toward it. A metal door stood half open. Inside, a cot, a lantern, medical supplies, and a woman chained to the wall, gaunt, bruised, face half-shadowed. She looked up, eyes glassy, and Rourke's breath caught. It wasn't Sandra. It was Jessa. Moran alive, barely. He dropped to her side. Jessa. Hey, I'm with the SBI. You're safe now. She blinked, tried to speak. Nothing came out. Don't talk. Getting you out. He picked the lock on the shackle with a tool from his boot. Her wrists were raw, her breathing shallow. He lifted her gently. She pointed toward the map chamber. Cassandra, she whispered. Below. What's below? Her eyes rolled. Not human. Before he could ask more, the radio clipped to one of the guards outside crackled. We're moving now. Clean sight? Burn everything. 10 minutes. Rourke had no time. He hoisted Jessa over his shoulder and moved fast, retracing his steps, avoiding the chamber with the map, back through the cage room, through the tunnel, out into the light he reached. The SUV and tore away tires, kicking up dust and rock. Jessa lay in the back, eyes closed, whispering things he couldn't understand. By the time he reached the ranger station, she was unconscious again, but breathing. He called for backup, then locked himself in the office and pulled up the photo of the map again. The XHATCH 7 and something else, a phrase. Scribbled next to it in faint red ink. Project Nesting, GROUN. The words made his skin crawl. Not because he understood them, but because he didn't, and because whoever was behind all. This had just lost their most important secret. Jessa was alive, and she was starting to talk. Rourke waited outside the emergency clinic, jaw clenched, arms folded, eyes fixed on the door like it might open with answers instead of updates. It was nearly 3 a.m., but the adrenaline hadn't let him sleep. Inside, Jessa Marin was alive, but barely dehydrated, malnourished, deep bruising on her ribs and wrists, a dislocated shoulder, no broken bones. But a recent surgical scar across her abdomen the doctors couldn't explain. No one could, and until she woke up. The mystery of what happened underground stayed sealed in her head. He paced the gravel lot, pulling out the map. HED photographed in the bunker, hand-drawn, crude, but unmistakably detailed. Hatch 7, marked in red. Project Nesting Ground scribbled beside it like an afterthought, a nest. For what? Words Jessa had whispered haunted him. Not human. Rourke wasn't a man given to wild theories. He didn't believe in ghosts or aliens. His world operated on facts, on evidence. But nothing about this case made sense inside normal parameters anymore. Not the militia, not Cassandra, not the chain bolted inside a cave, not the high-tech underground compound sitting abandoned beneath Dead Gorge, and not the fact that Jessa Marin had been declared presumed dead almost a year ago and was now lying in a hospital bed 3 miles from where she vanished, alive, terrified, and not alone down there by sunrise. She was awake. Barely a nurse called him in. Jessa looked thinner. Older, like the months underground, had drained her more than time ever could. Her voice was rough. She didn't waste it. You found the cave? She asked. Rourke nodded. I found Delco, then the chain. Then you. Her eyes watered. I tried to leave signs. The fire tower, the charcoal. I didn't think anyone would come. Someone didn't want us to, he said. You know who? She nodded weakly. Gibbs, and someone higher. I don't know their name. Only saw them once. Did Cassandra help you? A pause. Jessa licked her lips. At first, she got me out of the hatch. She'd been there longer. Years, maybe. She said it started as a test site, training. Then something else came in. Something darker.
What
did they do to you, Jessa? Her eyes went distant. They made us listen. He frowned. To what? She stared at the ceiling. They called it the voice. Said it wasn't real. But it got inside you. Made you forget where you were. You were Cassandra fought it. She taught me how. Rourke stepped closer. What was Project Nesting Ground? Her face twisted. They weren't just hiding. They were breeding something. His blood turned cold. What kind of something? Jessa turned slowly. Her voice cracked, not human. That afternoon, federal teams arrived. The SBI, DHS even. A black-suited group that didn't identify themselves. Rourke wasn't surprised. As soon as he sent in the photo of the map, phone started ringing. The hatch was real. And it wasn't the only one. There were at least 6 others, some decommissioned, some never acknowledged in government records. He demanded to be included in the sweep of hatch. 7, they didn't argue. They needed him. What they didn't know was that Rourke had also found something else. After Jess's rescue, he'd returned to the Dead Gorge site with backup. The cage chamber had been burned. The map stripped from the wall, every crate removed, but someone had missed something. A camouflaged hatch door. It's buried beneath a metal grate and half a foot of dust, not far from where he found the map, stamped. Into the steel was H7 alpha restricted entry nitrogen monoxide, ACCESS, with an old biometric panel. They cut through it. What lay beneath wasn't just another room. It was an entire facility. The hatch opened into a narrow corridor lined with decaying lights and red warning paint. The air inside was stale like chemicals and ash. They descended slowly, weapons raised. Flashlights flickering over walls etched with old serial numbers and outdated military acronyms. One corridor led to a laboratory, rusted tables. Vials, surgical equipment no one had touched in years. A dry erase board still held a diagram. S. 1 sample. Sensory testing, complete containment. Breached. Secure all access points. Another room held cages, human-sized, some with claw marks on. The inside, and on the floor of the farthest cell, a scorched outline of something. Humanoid, but elongated. Twisted, the residue on the floor wasn't ash. It was blood, black and tar-like. No way to identify what species it belonged to. One agent threw up. Rourke just stared. They moved deeper in the back of the facility. They found the power core still functional, still humming. Someone had kept it running, which meant someone had been down here. Recently, there was one more door. Steel. Reinforced. It took 3 men to pry it open, and what they found behind it made. Every man in the team stepped back, a nursery rows of tanks. Some shattered. Some intact, filled with a thick yellowish fluid, and in each an embryo. 6 inches long, 8, floating, unformed, but not entirely inhuman. Some were closer to human than others, too close. One agent whispered, "Dear God, what is this?" Rourke said nothing. He just walked to the central console, flipped open the panel, and read the last log entry. Project status, samples 001017. Viable. Sample 018 breach confirmed. Human hybridization. Phase escalated. Relocation ordered. Coordinates uploaded. Hatch 9 active. Rourke stepped back. Hatch 9? That wasn't on the original map. He turned to the others. Get photos. Seal this place. We're not alone out here. Later as night fell, Jessa regained more strength. He sat by her bed. You were right, he said. She nodded slowly. Cassandra told me they took her brother, Dean. He was against it, tried to get out. That's why they buried him. She's still out there, Rourke said. She won't come in. She's too scared. What are they building, Jessa? Why here? She looked out the window. Toward the dark desert. This land, sacred to someone, the old tribes. The stories say there are spirits beneath it. Voices. Something ancient. Rourke frowned. You think they believed that? She turned back to him. I think they heard something. And then she whispered one more thing. They weren't building an army, Rourke. They were building a mother. He stared, and somewhere, under the dust and bone of Monument Valley, something stirred. Waiting, watching, growing. When the hatch to Site 7 Alpha was sealed for the last time, no one spoke. Not the black-suited officials in unmarked SUVs, not the field agents hauling out fluid samples under strict double-locked biohazard protocol. Not Rourke, who stood at the perimeter of the canyon ridge, watching the final crate rise from the earth, steam hissing from its edges like a breath held too long. Inside that crate was sample 017. It looked disturbingly close to something once human. It's just scaled wrong. Too long in the limbs, the ribcage too wide, fingers webbed but bony like claws stretched over the ghost of a child. No one wanted to ask what 001 through 016. It looked like no one dared ask what happened to sample 018E, only one marked breached. But Rourke knew they weren't all destroyed, because the map didn't end it. Hatch 7 and Hatch 9 was still out there. Jessa had begun to remember the more she spoke. The more fragments of her month's underground surfaced, the more terrified she became. She could recall sounds, distorted over PA system's sharp tones, followed by whispers and languages. She didn't speak, but somehow understood. She remembered the feeding rituals. She remembered women screaming behind glass doors. And she remembered something else, Cassandra's final warning. They won't stop with me. If they lose this place, they'll just open the next one. And next time they won't bother pretending it's an experiment. They gave Rourke 1 week. 1 week to file a report, clear his desk, and turn. Overall materials related to the Marin disappearance and the investigation into Site 7. No one said the words, cover up. They didn't have to. The lab was gone now. So were the bodies. And no one had an appetite to explain how a ranger presumed dead had been held beneath U.S. soil, fed intravenously, and subjected to something between psychological warfare and medical torture for over 9 months. No one had answers, but someone had plans. He found the clue in the horse's bones. That was how all this started. Now, with Jessa safe and the compound sealed, it had been easy to leave it alone. But the damage had already begun to spread. 3 days after Site 7 was shut down, Rourke received a manila envelope at his temporary residence in Flagstaff. No. Return address inside was a single photograph. It showed the same embryo. Tank he'd seen in Hatch 7, but this one wasn't empty. It was active. Lit cables connected. Fluid clear. Handwritten across the bottom. Hatch 9, active Bryce. UT attached was a sticky note. Mother moved west. We don't have long. CC as Sandra somehow. She'd slipped past the perimeters again, and she was warning him. Bryce, the edges of Utah's canyon country. Vast, wild, unpolized stretches of badlands and deep stone corridors where anything could be hidden. Beneath the surface, he grabbed a bag. He didn't bother calling it in. He knew the second he did, it would vanish just like Hatch 7, so Rourke drove. He found Bryce and full tourist Bloom family swarming into hotels, vans unloading hikers, everyone staring upward at the red, jagged skyline. No one looking down, but Rourke was, and Cassandra had left him a sign. Near the base of a slot canyon just outside the park's main boundary, he found a strip of red cloth tied to a pine sapling faded. Torn, but deliberate. He followed the markers. 6 of them, spaced carefully along a climbing trail only locals would know. At the 7th marker, the trail vanished into the rock hand. What looked like a natural fissure revealed itself to be cut man-made. He ducked inside. 10 minutes later, he found the door. Steel, new still. Humming, he pressed his hand against the surface and whispered to no one. You're still here. He didn't knock. He found the access panel, cracked the casing, bypassed the lock like he'd done in Hatch 7. The door slid open. Cold air rushed out, and something else. A sound low, rhythmic like a heartbeat. He stepped inside. Hatch 9 wasn't. A lab? It was a nursery. He walked slowly, light casting shadows against curved walls and steel catwalks. Rows of tanks lined both sides, some larger than the ones at Site 7. In the far chamber, he found heat maps displayed on a monitor, 7 distinct shapes, moving behind a reinforced wall. One was larger than the rest, much larger. Rourke stepped forward, saw the security label burned into the steel. Sample 018 Independent Development. Maturation stage. Complete mother host. Stabilized release protocol. Scheduled -T-73:0. Oh, his mouth went dry. Release? He reached for the emergency panel, but it was already fused shut. Someone had started the countdown. A voice echoed from the catwalk above. Don't touch that. Rourke turned sharply, weapon drawn. Cassandra stood in the red light, pale and wiry, a rifle strapped across her back and a small case in her hands. You came, she said. He nodded. You never really gave me a choice. You still don't have one, she replied. This thing is waking up. He gestured at the tanks. Why? What's the purpose? She descended the stairs slowly. They thought they could make a better human, splice the worst out, leave only instinct, loyalty, obedience, and they got it halfway right. She opened the case and pulled out a canister. Thick glass, squirming mass. What the hell is that? Part of her, the real mother. This was the original strain. They fed it to test subjects, made them hallucinate. But it didn't work on everyone. Rourke backed up. You brought it with you? I brought it to end this. She's too big now, too smart. And she's calling to the others. She handed him a detonator. Small, red button, fired to a series of charges already planted. You blow this place, she said. You kill every trace. And you? He asked. I was born here, she whispered. I die here. He stared at her. You're not I was sample? 005, she said, and I got out. But part of me never left. She turned. Rourke watched her vanish into the shadows of the nursery. He didn't follow. He pressed the button. The explosion was contained. Underground locals thought it was a small quake. News reported a gas line rupture near an old mining claim. No. One questioned it. No one came to investigate. No one ever would. Rourke drove back through the desert with the sunrise at his back and the case beside him sealed. Encrypted and marked for one person only. Jessa Marin. She met him at the trailhead 2 days. Later, no reporters, no questions, just silence between them. He handed her the case. She stared at it a long time, then nodded and whispered, Let's bury it where no one will find it. They rode into the canyons together. Her new horse, a gray mare named Belle, was nervous. The desert was still, but far below the rocks. In places the maps didn't mark, something old waited, watching, not dead, just sleeping until someone opened the wrong door again. There were 2 kinds of silence in the desert. One was natural, peaceful. It's empty, the kind that settled between the howl of wind and the creak of pine, a silence that felt earned. The other kind was the absence of something that should have been there. And that was what Jessa Marin felt as she stood at the edge of Cradle Basin, staring down into a canyon that hadn't been on any map, listening for birdsong, and hearing nothing, not wind, not insects, not even the whisper of dust. They'd buried the canister here 2 weeks ago. She and Rourke had ridden out with PIX rope, enough steel casing to withstand any blast short of a nuke. They'd gone 6 feet deep beneath sandstone, sealed it in a crushed rock composite, covered it with drifted stone from a nearby wash. It should have been enough, but now, Jessa wasn't so sure, because the earth was warm beneath her feet, too warm in Beltha. Numer refused to step within 10 yards of the burial site. The horse just stood there, nostrils flared, ears twitching backward like she could hear something Jessa couldn't, something pulsing, something alive. Back in town, Rourke was watching a file download, encrypted satellite data. Courtesy of a tech friend, he owed too many favors. The file was tagged S3NTR, remote activity, Utah CC2ORHE, ran a diagnostic.thermal. Then motion, then radio spectrometry. All 3 pointed to the same anomaly, a signature deep underground, consistent with biological mass roughly the size of a shipping container. Moving slightly over a 48-hour cycle, it matched the location of cradle. Basin, which wasn't possible. The canister had no power, no living tissue, no ability to move. And yet, something down there was moving. Rourke sat back in the motel room chair and opened the top drawer of the desk. His badge was inside, along with the resignation, a letter he'd written but never filed. He stared at them both, then closed the drawer. Some things don't let you walk away. The third anomaly came 3 days later. Not from the ground, from the sky. A local rancher sent in drone footage to the sheriff's office after noticing strange patterns in his cattle's behavior stampeding away from a canyon that had never given him trouble before. The drone had flown over Cradle Basin and captured a heat signature an orb, circular, faint but growing. Right above the burial site, Jessa didn't need to see more. She called Rourke that night. Her voice was low, measured, but he heard the edge in it. He's trying to get out. Who? You know who? She whispered, or what? They met the next morning before dawn. No gear, no officials, just two people who'd already been to hell and back. Trying to make sure no one else had too. I should have crushed it, she said quietly. You couldn't have known, Rourke replied. But Cassandra did, Jessa said. She knew it wasn't enough.
Right.
Why else would she stay behind? Rourke didn't answer. Instead, he unrolled a topographic map and pointed to a small ridge northwest of Cradle Basin. There's something else here, a second site. It's covered up older than the first. A second hatch. No, he said. Worse. She didn't ask how he knew. They both understood that this was no longer about recovery or closure. This was about containment. Maybe for the last time, they hiked in under moonlight. Belle wouldn't come, so they walked 6 miles over broken shale, loose rock, and sharp ridgelines until they found it. A depression in the stone shaped, like a crater rimmed with white mineral deposits and dead juniper trees. At its center, a single vent, rusted shut. No markings, but Rourke's scanner pinged immediately. Radiation, high, heat, rising, acoustic. Heartbeat, it's growing again. He said. No, Jessa whispered. It's gestating. She knelt beside the vent and pressed her palm to the metal. A vibration met her hand, slow, rhythmic, steady, and then between heartbeats a whisper, not in her ears, in her mind. Mother never sleeps. She staggered back. Rourke caught her. She didn't speak again for an hour. When she did, her voice was flat. She's ready. I called it in. One final report, through one final back channel, using Cassandra's old credentials. The response came 12 hours later. Clear the area. Do not interfere. Cleaners en route. Jessa stared at the message. They're not going to contain it, she said. No, Rourke replied. They're going to harvest it. That night, they made a choice. One last ride into the canyon, one last shot to end it. They reached the vent at midnight. Rourke had brought explosives low yield. Directional, just enough to collapse the tunnel beneath. Jessa brought something else, the canister. She dug it up herself, and now. She held it in her arms like a child. She wants it back, Jessa said. She's calling it. It's a part of her. And if we give it to her, Rourke asked, she'll come for it.
That's
what I'm afraid of. But Jessa just looked at the pit, then said, better she comes here to us than anywhere else. They planted the canister above the vent, wired the charges, and waited for 3 hours. Nothing happened. Then at 3:07 a.m., the ground began to tremble. Rose through the stone like a throat clearing. The vent cracked open, and a voice spilled. Out, daughter. Jessa's breath caught. She stepped forward, arms shaking, tears streaming, whispering, no, not your daughter. Not anymore. And then she pressed the detonator. The charges blew inward. The canister.
Ow!
The earth swallowed the scream, and for a moment, everything was still. No wind, no whisper, no heat, just quiet. The right kind. the peaceful kind. They never found the bodies. The cleanup team arrived too. Slate just an empty crater, and one final note carved into the sandstone with a knife. Let her sleep. The canyon was sealed within a week, declared unstable. Access revoked. All records scrubbed. But the desert remembers, and so do the horses. Sometimes Belle still rides to the edge of the basin and just stands there, ears perked, as if listening for something. Sometimes she hears it, and when she does, she runs as fast and as far as she can, because she remembers too. She was there when Jessa disappeared the first time, and she was there, and she never came back. The morning after the crater sealed itself shut, the sky over Cradle Basin turned a color no one could name. It wasn't red, it wasn't orange, it was something between. Like blood soaked through rust, smeared across the clouds, the cleanup team called it a weather anomaly. Locals called it a warning, and one man, an old tracker named Dale Tompkins, who used to ride the basin line with Cassandra, Rowe called it something else. Wake. Because the land wasn't just mourning, it was waiting. Part 10. Let her sleep. 6 weeks had passed since the vent blew. 6 weeks since Jessa Marin vanished into the pit. Taken the canister and whatever had been inside it with her. 6 weeks since Rourke disappeared without a trace. The Bureau sent out to search teams. Then 3 nothing. Not a body, not a blood trail, not even boot prints. Only Belle, the mare, was found standing at the edge of the basin, hooves caked in ash, trembling. She wouldn't let anyone near her for days, and when she finally let the vet approach, he found something lodged beneath her saddle. A single shard of bone, bleached white, too small to be horse, too long to be human, and marked with 6 tiny, perfect kutzas. If it had been sawn off, the bone was turned over to forensics, but it never made it to the lab. That shipment, along with 2 others from the basin, was lost in transit. At least, that's what the report said. The Courier AM, private contractor, quit 2 days later and hasn't been seen since. All he left behind was a voicemail. There in the marrow, I saw them move. Meanwhile, back at the outpost near Buckthorn Ridge, a new ranger arrived to replace Jessa. Her name was Annie Reeves. 20-7. Sharp. No family ties. Former Army intelligence. In other words, perfect. But Annie didn't like the feel of the station. Too quiet, too clean. Like someone had scrubbed it, and she found something odd on her second day. A set of old files buried beneath the floorboards. In the armory, Cassandra's files, and Jess's field notes. The last page read, "It doesn't come from the stars. It comes from below." Annie started asking questions, first around the office, then in town, then at the Ranger HQ in Moab, but no one knew anything about Cradle Basin, or pretended not to, when she pressed harder. She got reassigned, 300 miles south, desert border. Watch, remote. Boring. Empty. She lasted for days, then she went back on her own, hiked into Cradle Basin, solo. No radio, no sat-phone, just a revolver, a flashlight, and a USB drive with every file she could find. She never made it to the vent. She never had to. Because 20 feet into the canyon, she found a pile of animal bones, stacked perfectly, arranged in a spiral at the center. A ranger badge burnt, melted, but still legible. Number 137, JMRRA, that should been the end of it. Another buried truth. Another name added to the list of rangers who never came home. But then, 6 months later, Belle returned on her own. No saddle, no bit. Just a long red scratch down her left flank and a strange mark burned into her neck. A perfect circle, 3 inches wide. Inside it, a handy. Pre-ant. Too small for a man, too large for a woman. No. Fingers just slits, as if pressed by something with bone beneath skin. And nothing else. She walked back into the ranger station. Corral and waited. Didn't eat, didn't sleep. Just stood, as if expecting someone or something that night. The cameras GLI'd CHE. All of them. The last frame captured was at 2:13 a.m., a shadow. Moving past the gate, No form, no face, just a silhouette bent at the waist, limbs too long. Neck tilted sideways like it was listening, and then it was gone. Bell was gone too. Vanished. No. Hoof. Piers. Just a small patch of scorched grass and the smell of metal. Years. Passed, the story faded. New rangers came. None asked questions. The canyon was closed. No one visited the old vent anymore, but sometimes. On clear nights when the moon is low, campers in the backcountry near Buckthorn still report the same thing. A figure on horseback, standing at the edge of a cliff, watching, not moving, not blinking, just watching. And if they get too close, they say the air goes still, too still, and they hear a sound that doesn't make sense. Not a word, not a voice. Something. In between, something like a whisper inside bone. And sometimes if they listen too long, they feel something open behind there. Something that doesn't go away. Something that waits. Because some things don't sleep. And some things remember. And when they do, they call you home forever.